Everyone has secrets. I said it was a secret, but oh well. Her words, coming from someone 10 years younger, made me. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the scent of fresh ink. My name is Tom. I'm turning 50 this year, and I've been divorced once. It's been 8 years since I quit my long-term job at a major trading company. Now, I work part-time at a large bookstore in the city. I fake all my academic and work history to work here as a part-timer. It means I've started a new life by erasing all past events. I'm in charge of paper books. Friends often make fun of me for working part-time at 50, saying it's pathetic, but I'm satisfied with my current life and myself. In the morning, I take a deep breath between the bookshelves. The smell of fresh ink and paper fills my lungs. If there's something more soothing, I'd like to know. Before the store opens, I clean the bookshelves and align the spines with the edges. The neatly arranged paperbacks. This is what I call refreshing. You're energetic for a part-timer in the morning. Since you have a job with little responsibility, you must be stress-free. The one who spoke to me while I was aligning the spines was John, a full-time employee at this bookstore. I think he mentioned he's 32 this year. To my former self, John would have been considered a subordinate due to his youth, but now I'm someone he bosses around. Whenever John has a bad day at work, he takes it out on me like this. It's probably his way of relieving stress, but it's a nuisance to me. However, I'm too old to get angry at John's words. I just let it go in one ear and out the other, and respond with a wry smile, yeah, I guess. In this bookstore, there seems to be an invisible wall between part-timers and full-timers. It's probably because there are many full-timers like John. I assume juniors observe their seniors and act the same way, leading to the current unchanging relationship. Ignoring John's sarcasm, I focused on the spines of the paperbacks again. My fingers stopped momentarily on the fifth spine from the left. The title of a book I once bought for my daughter when I was still married was printed there. It was a minor book, but it seems it got published as a paperback. I briefly thought of my daughter, whom I hadn't seen in a long time. I lost my family 8 years ago. I was always focused on work and neglected my home and family. I believed that was a man's way of life. I think I made my wife feel lonely all the time. When she asked for a divorce, I angrily said, "Get out." My wife took our daughter and left the house just as I had told her to. I thought she would cool down and come back after a while. I didn't realize how determined she was and thought it was a simple matter. I really was a fool. A few days later, I was stunned when a divorce notice arrived from her lawyer. Since then, I haven't seen either my daughter or my wife. I have my pride, too. I threw myself into my work even more, not noticing the trap set by a colleague in my haste to achieve results. In the end, I lost my job at the same time as my divorce. I was forced to resign from the company I had devoted myself to for so many years. Losing both my job and my family, I hit rock bottom in my life. A lonely middle-aged man with nothing but money. After resigning, the only place I went was this bookstore. The smell of fresh paper and ink. One day, I saw a part-time job advertisement in the store and applied immediately. Given my age, I was worried about being turned down, but apparently, they needed someone urgently, so I started working the next day. I really was lucky. Tom, it's time for the morning meeting. As I was lost in thoughts of my daughter, I was reminded of the morning meeting by Sarah, the full-time employee in charge of art books. She has long hair braided up and always wears dark clothes, earning her the nickname, the Witch of the Third Floor, from regular customers. Art books are on the third floor, and she is responsible for that area. Her pale wrists are so translucent that you can see the faint blue veins, which sometimes startles me. Moreover, Sarah is a striking beauty who turns heads. She's not unfriendly, but she never smiles. I think the term cool beauty was made for her. Oh, sorry. I'll be right there. I hurriedly dashed out from between the bookshelves. In my haste, I nearly bumped into Sarah. I caught a whiff of her usual perfume. A cool, refreshing scent that suits her well. I'm sorry. Apologizing for almost bumping into her, Sarah simply signaled with her eyes that it was okay. She rarely speaks unless necessary. We took the elevator down together to the first floor, where the morning meeting was held, and most of the staff were already gathered. I saw John glaring at us as we arrived together. Everyone in the bookstore knew that John had a thing for Sarah. I find it absurd that he would be jealous of a 50-year-old man like me. John probably picks on me excessively because he wants to impress Sarah. He wants to show off by belittling me and boasting about his famous university degree and savings. Of course, Sarah isn't the type to be swayed by such childish antics. That's fine, but because of John's constant mocking, I've been labeled as useless in the bookstore. I don't really mind, but it's a bit sad to be ridiculed by part-timers who are the same age as my daughter. After the morning meeting, as everyone returned to their departments, Sarah waited for me with the elevator door open. This happens every morning. As I was about to get on, giving a nod of thanks, John yanked me back with great force. "Use the stairs, old man." He slid into the elevator and smiled at Sarah. "You agree, don't you, Sarah?" John tried to curry favor with Sarah. Sarah pointed to the elevator's capacity sign with her slender finger. "John, can you read this?" At Sarah's icy remark, John's face turned pale. I quietly got into the elevator and pressed the close button, shutting the door. The elevator was filled with an awkward silence. When we arrived at the third floor, Sarah exited without a word. John hurriedly followed her. His panicked demeanor was so amusing that I burst out laughing as soon as the doors closed. Sarah's handling of him was just too perfect. I doubt John could ever win her over, even if he had 100 years. Too bad for him. Everyday life may be monotonous, but it has its moments of interest and change. Just the other day, a young foreign woman was struggling to find something on the paperback floor. I looked around, confirmed there were no other staff members available, and approached her in English. But she looked puzzled and shook her head. Next, I tried speaking to her in French. Her face lit up instantly. She was a French woman who had just arrived in the States and didn't understand much English. She was looking for the art book section, so I guided her to the third floor and found the book she was looking for. It was an art theory book written in French. We went to the register together, and I handed her over to Sarah. "She needs to pay. Please take care of it." As I handed over the book, Sarah glanced back and forth between me and the book with a blank expression. Then she quietly said, "Understood." I felt a little nervous, thinking I might have done something wrong, but she returned to her usual self the next moment. So it was probably just my imagination. I bowed slightly to the French customer and returned to my post. "Hey, don't leave your floor." There were some suspicious high school girls around earlier, sneaking peeks at the register. Stay alert. As soon as I got back to the paperback floor, John started yelling at me. He doesn't care even if customers are around. Sorry, I was helping a customer. The excuse slipped out before I could stop it. But this only made John's anger worse. What? There was only a foreign customer earlier. No way you could handle that. Stop lying. You're a 50-year-old part-timer. Not a prestigious university graduate like me. John's shouting echoed to other floors. Everyone, both regular customers and colleagues, probably thought, there he goes getting yelled at again. I sighed internally, thinking, here we go again. John seemed to enjoy lecturing me, his voice growing louder and louder. At that moment, I noticed a high school girl watching us. She looked like she wanted to say something to John but quickly turned and ran away when our eyes met. Was she the girl John was talking about? John's lecture continued for about 20 minutes. About 2 weeks after John's tirade, another foreign customer, this time a man, was wandering around the store repeatedly. One of the part-time girls asked, "What should we do?" I asked, "Could you call out to John? If I stepped in, I'd get another lecture." John, boasting about his prestigious degree, should handle it smoothly. Feeling flattered by the girl's request, John strutted over to the floor. He confidently approached the foreign customer and spoke loudly enough for us to hear. The customer looked puzzled and shook his head at John's English. And then he said, "Can you help me find it?" in French. He handed John a memo, clearly looking for some materials. John's face turned to one of despair as he took the memo. It was probably written in French. John always boasted about being multilingual. Who knew he couldn't understand French? Employees and part-timers watched from a distance as John began to fluster. His helpless and ridiculous state, after so confidently approaching the customer, was almost pitiful. "Aren't you going to help him?" I was startled by the voice behind me and turned around. Sarah had come down from the art books floor and was still looking at John. "What are you going to do?" she asked again. I wouldn't be much help to John. To be honest, I wanted to abandon John and laugh at him with the others. I held a grudge against him. Embarrassed that Sarah might see through my mean-spirited thoughts, I felt my cheeks flush. Sarah's piercing gaze seemed to see right through me. Lying to her was impossible. I took a deep breath and approached John, gently tapping him on the shoulder. "What? Can't you see I'm busy right now?" John snapped, his voice high with anxiety. When he realized it was me, his face turned bright red. I quietly said, "I'll take over," and motioned for him to step back. John looked bewildered. But he also looked somewhat relieved. I turned to the customer and started speaking in French. The customer looked relieved and began to explain. He said he was a friend of the woman I had helped with art books the other day. She had advised him to come to this bookstore if he needed help finding something. I apologized for not being able to assist him sooner. I asked him what books he was looking for. The memo listed several book titles in French. Like before, they were art theory books. "Sarah, he's looking for art books. Could you assist us?" I called to Sarah, who nodded quietly. To my surprise, a faint smile appeared on her face. Seeing Sarah smile for the first time made my heart skip a beat. I was incredibly flustered. Sarah addressed the customer in fluent French, saying, "I'll show you the way." "What? Sarah, you can speak French?" "I studied abroad," she said casually, leaving me stunned. Then why hadn't she stepped in to help John herself? I don't understand why she dragged me out. Maybe Sarah has something in mind. "Tom, you know where the books are, right? Can you show him? I'll get the ones from the closed stacks." With that, Sarah disappeared into the back. Left with the customer, I continued the conversation in French, locating each book he needed. During our search, he was fascinated by the rarity of an American person speaking French, asking many questions and making small talk. Later, one of the part-timers told me that John had been glaring at us the whole time. John had been humiliated in front of the staff and customers. I'm sure he now resents me even more. Especially in front of Sarah, who he admires. I couldn't help but worry that he might retaliate somehow. I felt someone's gaze and turned to see the high school girl I had noticed earlier watching us intently. Maybe she was looking for something too. "Are you looking for something?" I asked. She quickly shook her head, looking flustered. Her profile seemed familiar. Then she said quietly, "You were really cool just now." She must have seen the commotion. Embarrassed, I scratched my head. "Thank you. If you need any help, feel free to ask." She responded energetically, "Okay." Then she turned and bounced down the stairs. Her way of hopping down the stairs reminded me of my daughter when she was young. Not walking step by step, but hopping, like she was doing. I suddenly remembered the familiar sound of my daughter's footsteps in our large house. I hadn't seen her in so long. Would she be disappointed if she saw me now? Would she scold me for throwing away everything for my career? The thought crossed my mind, and I felt a pang of sadness in my chest. "Tom? You look a bit pale. Are you okay?" Sarah had returned with the books from the closed stacks and was peering into my face. I must have looked down, thinking about my daughter. "I'm fine," I said shortly, forcing a smile. Sarah gave me a skeptical look. She must have realized I wasn't going to tell her the truth. Turning to the customer, she began explaining the books in fluent French. "My role here was done," I quietly said. "I'll head back down," and returned to the paperback floor. As soon as I got back, John was waiting and immediately caught me. Another round of sarcasm and lectures, I thought, feeling weary. I've tried to tell myself that John's constant lectures are just part of my job, but it's still hard to listen to. John pulled me into a spot hidden by the bookshelves and glared at me intensely. I honestly thought he might hit me. John's expression was furious and tense. I expected him to start lecturing and berating me, but he seemed uncharacteristically hesitant. Do you? Unable to stand the long silence, I spoke first. Maybe it's because of anger and embarrassment. John's body was trembling slightly. If there's nothing, I'll get back to work. Saying that, I tried to leave, but John's hand grabbed my shoulder firmly. He gripped both of my shoulders so tightly it hurt. He hung his head and mumbled something. I couldn't hear what he said. "Excuse me?" I asked. John lifted his head, his face flushed, and said, "Thank you." The words were so unexpected that I didn't understand what he meant at first. I never imagined I would hear words of gratitude from John. "What?" "No, it's okay," I replied clumsily, too surprised to make sense. But the surprise didn't end there. With a strained voice, John said to me, "Tom, please teach me French." He bowed deeply as he said it. Seeing John's humility, I was impressed. He had his good points. Few people can admit their mistakes and bow their heads, especially when they're young. For John, thanking me and asking for French lessons must have been a blow to his pride. Yet he chose to bow his head to better himself, and I honestly thought that was pretty cool. "When would you like to start?" "I'll work around your schedule." I felt a warm feeling in my chest and spoke to John more kindly than usual. Then it hit me. The tension between John and me was partly due to my attitude. I realized my dislike for him had shown in my demeanor and voice. I hadn't tried to meet him halfway. I was the same way in the past. I was reminded of that. "I'll check my schedule," John said and disappeared into the back room. Today had been so eventful that my head was spinning. But I felt oddly refreshed. A person isn't just the parts they show on the surface. I had only been looking at the parts of John that fit my preconceived image of him. "Tom, the customer has left. He told me to thank you," Sarah said, coming down from the third floor, as I stared absent-mindedly at the back room where John had gone. The French customer had asked her to pass on his gratitude to me. "Sarah, you made it possible for me to help. You deserve the credit," I said, feeling a bit embarrassed. Sarah made a slightly exasperated face and said, "That's an exaggeration. But you could have handled it yourself, Sarah. Why didn't you help John directly?" When I voiced the question that had been lingering in my mind, Sarah groaned in frustration, saying, Maybe I wanted to see you give it your all, Tom." After a brief silence, Sarah explained that she had noticed early on that I understood foreign languages. She mentioned how I had accurately sorted foreign language art books from my first day, and it made sense. A store clerk who understands foreign languages is valuable, so she thought we had hired a great part-timer, but I was hiding that fact. When I was told that it made her a bit angry, I was startled. She thought today was a good opportunity. By showing my skills in front of colleagues, she hoped it would motivate others. John had indeed decided to study. It felt like everything was part of Sarah's plan. "And I wanted your daughter to see her dad being cool," Sarah said, pointing to a high school girl peeking at us from behind a bookshelf. The girl was the one who had spoken to me earlier. When our eyes met, she jumped slightly. "What? My daughter? Emily?" I muttered, and Sarah gently pushed my back, urging me toward the girl. "Emily?" My voice trembled with emotion as I spoke. The high school girl in front of me nodded firmly in response to my question. When my wife and I separated, she was still so young. Girls grow up so fast. Looking closely, I could see the traces of her childhood self. "You look cool when you're working, Dad." Emily's eyes were glistening with tears as she looked up at me. "I recognized you right away. You haven't changed at all from the photos." Emily said she saw me by chance at the bookstore and kept coming back. She wanted to make sure it was really me. She said her behavior had been suspicious enough that she was almost accused of shoplifting. When they were about to accuse me unjustly, it was Sarah who helped me. She listened to my complaints and supported me. Emily laughed, saying she initially vented all her anger about me to Sarah. Sarah had listened quietly and empathetically. After I finished ranting, Sarah told me that the dad I was seeing was just one side of him. That's why she kept coming back to observe me. Emily said she saw me help a colleague I didn't get along with, handle a customer no one else could, and send them off with a smile. She was honestly surprised and moved. I didn't know that side of you, Dad. But you were probably always like that, right? Working hard to provide for us even if Mom didn't understand. Kids grow up so fast. And Sarah. Her ability to bridge the gap between Emily and me was astonishing. You showed me how cool you are, so here's a present from me. Emily stood on tiptoe and whispered in my ear. What she said was an unexpected gift for me. This is a secret, but I think Sarah likes you, Dad. She smiled mischievously. I want to say you should get back with Mom, but I owe Sarah too. She told me she wouldn't be angry no matter who I chose, making me blush. I wondered how I would face Sarah from now on. Emily waved goodbye and left the bookstore, saying, "Good luck, Dad." At the end of my shift, I ran into Sarah in front of the store's shutter. I was so nervous that I acted suspiciously. Sarah seemed to understand everything from my behavior. I said it was a secret, but oh well. Sarah sighed softly, and I hastily explained that Emily wasn't at fault. I quickly told Sarah that Emily was just trying to cheer me up. Did it work? Will my love be a special gift to you, Tom? Sarah's direct gaze made my heart race. I felt like I might collapse. I took a deep breath and looked straight into her eyes. It's the best gift ever. Would my I love you be a special gift for you, Sarah? My voice trembled pathetically, but it couldn't be helped. That was all I could manage. Sarah smiled warmly and said clearly, "Of course." I was so relieved and surprised that my legs gave out, and I sat down on the spot. Sarah's delicate hand reached out to me. "Shall we go home together?" Her hand was incredibly warm. I felt like my second chance at life was starting at that very moment.